Some of you enjoy Queen Furry. That's fine. A great many people did not. And Square Enix didn't consider that when they created this product. 7.1 did nothing to remedy that problem, and this ever-shrinking player base of ours makes it clear that inconsideration had consequences. I guarantee, if Crowd had been treated better, if the scions were useful and relevant, even if nothing else in Dawntrail was different, that still would have improved the game's quality considerably. And now, with only post-MSQ patches to sustain us, there's little to no chance it ever will as far as Dawntrail is concerned. Problem number 3, content release. We're not getting much. And after 6 solid months of the game being out, people are starting to get real tired of waiting for things to get interesting. The only people eating good at the moment are the hardcore players. The chaotic raids appear to be giving people a major thrill, and not much else to discuss. The Alliance raids have been out for a few months, most of us have those fights memorized. The dungeons are only fun for leveling and grinding, which gets tiresome after a while. We have a few more months until the next patch is out. 14 is in the midst of a major dry spell. I understand this is nothing new. The game always goes through slow periods where our interests wane until fresh material draws the crowds back. But that leads to another part of this issue because we're waiting longer than ever before for new patches to drop, which only exacerbates people's indifference. We used to get new patches every 3.5 months, and new expansions every 2 years like clockwork. Endwalker broke this trend, being released around 2 years 5 months after Shadowbringers, due most likely to the coronavirus being a little twat-hard everywhere it went. Then Dawntrail was released 2 years and 7 months after Endwalker, and now patch drops are 4.5 months apart. We're getting new updates less often, and we're getting less content with those updates. Yet we're paying the same amount for this service. My subscription fee has not gone down. Mog Station prices have not eased last I checked. We're getting charged the same for less in return.
Hey Caboose, give me some money. Okay, wait. Is this a trick? I'll pay you $100 to show me how it works.
That doesn't even mention the housing dilemma. 14's housing system. It's designed to strong-arm you into staying subscribed even if you're not playing. What is it now? Every 45 days you need to log in or lose your home? I made a recent video about why we're still here playing 14 despite the backlash. Plenty of you first responded with, I have a house. And I cannot argue with that, especially those with large houses. Those are remarkably tough to get. It's quite an in-game luxury, but a luxury with a short leash attached. In these trying times, folks are bound to start asking, why the hell do I care? If 14's developers don't pick up the pace soon, many people may stop caring about even that. Then there's really no reason to stick around. The real problem with this is Square treats 14 like it's a golden goose, a steady cash flow they can use for other projects, but they don't like putting money back into it. They say we have around 1 million subscribers. Assuming they pay monthly, that's $14.99 a month. That's basically $15 million a month, $180 million per year in just subscription fees. That doesn't include Mog Station sales, which are mostly just ones and zeros, not even physical products. Square, man, your accounting team needs to concede that at least occasionally, you gotta put some cash back into your product, or it's gonna kill over. That seems to be the case right now. At least hire some better writers. Scan YouTube for a few hours. There's some serious talent amongst independent content creators. Don't let that go to waste. Now granted, we do have some good stuff on the way in 2025. I want to be fair here. We're getting a new zone for relic weapons. Lord knows we missed that in Endwalker. Boja from Shadowbringers was by and large an entertaining zone, with lots of perks for those who put the time in, and mounts and gear. The final forms of the relic weapons were shit. Yeah, they're glow-in-the-dark Nerf toys. They were the dumbest designs. I'd rather be seen wielding the Muku Katana than this embarrassing glam. But still, that's something to look forward to. Then there's the FF14 mobile game. I don't know about this one. I never really got into that old game. The last one I downloaded was Field Ninja. Not sure if he was asking for this given the problems he has, but it's still an option for us. And we're getting the content exploration, sort of upgrade to the Island Sanctuary, which was not bad. It's an acquired taste, I admit. It definitely had a great deal of room to grow. If you don't care about crafting, gathering, and the like, this probably wasn't your thing. But there was a charm to it. What's important is that Square built upon those qualities over multiple expansions, gradually increasing the appeal. Who knows, it may even include combat elements inside. They can add unique weapon plans you can create. This isn't the place for suggesting improvements, though I have several ideas to tackle the problems. If this video does well, I'll make that a priority. Issue number 4, class simplification. This one has been getting comments in some previous videos, and it's high time we address it. There's no getting around the fact that our adventure classes are getting tamer and blander with every new expansion. It's at the point where some classes can be handled by hitting the same few buttons and clearing the loop. I started playing back in Stormblood. This was before things started getting bad, and I can remember the class system being far more dynamic than what we have now. Perfect example, Darkmoon, the edgiest of combat roles, though Reaper can't give it a run for its money. Once upon a time, in a long lost era, 2018. God, those were simpler days. Classes had much larger mana pools they could utilize, Dark Knight included, and one of its abilities was called Blood Traps. It converted damage to MP. Oh, I loved this skill. There was no greater thrill to throw yourself into a mob of enemies and watch that MP gauge refill while their HP held steady. Enemy damage fuels you for both. It suited the Dark Knight build perfectly. You then come Shadowbringers, and they simplify the role for a horrendous foe. I love Shadowbringers. I maintain it is objectively the best untrained 14th lineup. But that too is an argument for another time. Unfortunately, this is where Square comes down and simplify its classes. MP gauges were limited to 10,000. Many skills designed to accommodate larger mana pools were cut, Blood Price included. Dark Knight never recovered from this. The existing skill set in Dawntrail is still so simple and so bland. You had to keep focusing on them.
I need people with military training.
You have military training.
I need people who understand military training.
Wow, look who's getting picked.
Yeah, beggars can't be choosers.
Now, reasonable minds can differ on how strong the adventure class is, but even fans of Dark Knight have to admit it's been watered down over the years. And other roles have as well. My wife, who also plays a game, it's Alimet, she used to love Scholar. But in Shadowbringers, they apparently gutted so much of the class's actions, she wanted to quit the game in protest. That was her favorite, and we ruined it for her. I've been hearing more stories like these as the game trends on. Even Samurai, right personal favorite, got hit back in Intel when they took Titan. One single action. And why, if using your mental tap by 50%, had a sweet ass animation where you throw your sword around as if charging up the blade to attack. It was badass. It was simple. The action hardly ruined Samurai's performance by any means. It was plenty manageable, unless you use the brain capacity of the Goldfish Pokemon. It seems to me that Square tends to appeal to the lowest common denominator, people who throw bitch bits online and make a lot of noise. The company responds, thinking they're giving the customers what they want, when in truth they're bending the knee to a relatively small number, leaving the bulk of their player base to go without. Is it any wonder more and more people are bailing when their favorite class gets dragged through the gutter? Issue number 5, Nostalgia Baby. Yeah, 14 is really bad about this one. In certain doses, there's nothing wrong with borrowing certain elements from other games in the franchise. We had Final Fantasy VIII inspired the Shadowbringer Eden raids, 11 for the Stormblood Alliance, the Loporits and other FF4 material in Endwalker. Final Fantasy is a franchise decades in the making, and revisiting past installments to keep the franchise in motion isn't just acceptable, it's just good marketing. I do not fault them for the hustle. What I will fault them for is refusing to give 14 its own identity and instead borrow from others to distract us from that fact. Just look at Dawntrail, how much was recycled from previous games? The Lujiaxia and the Mamool are from 11, something Dawntrail has borrowed very heavily from. They did so little with Solution 9, even in 7.1, and Sphene as established was a mediocre antagonist, meaning the original elements are paltry at best. The storm-ridden lands are an interesting topography, and the apocalyptic war that turned the world into this was also interesting, but ultimately short-lived. And it hasn't much to do with the main plot. The only bits left to fall back on are it's Alexandria from FF9. And oh look, music from FF9. And maybe some other stuff from FF9. I don't know, I never played that one. Which is another issue in itself. If you don't play your other games, your nostalgia bleeding isn't worth much. What material here is uniquely Final Fantasy XIV? Wakama? Fuck that. To roll with an uninteresting nation, secession right was meant to expose the country and its cultures, all it did was put people to sleep. Nostalgia is a nice tool when used sparingly. 14 abuses that ladder. Even the Alliance raids its expansion or again based off on Fantasy 11. For those of us who haven't played 11, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. The Square needs to stop being so heavily dependent on. And lastly, number 6, the Duty Finder. Lord, this thing has become the bane of my mortal existence. Tell me, how often have you queued for leveling roulettes or 50-60, even the Alliance raids, just to get some obnoxious low-level dungeon from inventory? If you're lucky, you'll get something from Stormblood, and best yet, nobody in your party freaking needed it. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's along the same lines as class simplification. I don't want to level up my favorite DPS just to get stuck writing Carter's Cry or God Help Me Sanker's Tower for the 500th time. The other week, the wife and I queued up and got copied Factory. I was on the verge of tears at getting something good for once. It's gotten so bad, I straight up refuse to use the Duty Finder for leveling, only for tome farming. Even that's a rarity, given the Malaise Dawntrail. I'd rather do Fates on the Peace Tribe. They give us good XP, and I don't get stuck with the same 3 actions. The only workaround for this is the limited leveling roulette you can click on in the Duty Finder. This will give you control over the dungeon level for the people, except you need a full team of 4 players for that to work. And with the dwindling player pool, that creates some issues. Your usual FC friends may not be around to help, or if you're a nighttime person, like myself, There's even less people to run the duty finder with. And the only other option is the trust system, which unfortunately takes a really long time to get through, and all just to see your favorite Scion in their finest beachwear. You're really spoiling us, ain't you, Square? I'm afraid the trust system isn't much of a problem solver either. I get Square's reasoning for this, I surely do. Giving senior players a cop-out for running low-level stuff impedes newer players leveling up the first time. It's one or the other who gets the shaft in this predicament. In prioritizing one, they alienate the other. People are getting fed up. The rewards dungeons offer just aren't enough for how boring it is running these low-level instances. I've only maxed out a half-dozen classes this expansion, and I have no interest in touching the others. This expansion does not encourage such effort. Duty Finder needs a revamp. Either give higher level players a means to avoid the lower content, or at least increase the rewards for running that lower level stuff. It's gotta be preferable to losing the suspender for the Square. At this point, it's not even fun anymore. Why the hell would anybody play a game and pay for it if it isn't fun? That's what they're here for. You gotta give the customer what they want. Now, these are just some of the big reasons I see people are getting tired of working continual stream of cold. What are some other issues going on? Share your own grievances down below, and what you'd like to see done to improve them. And please remember, this channel, constant mockery aside, we don't want to see 14 crash and burn. The state of the game from where it was just a few years ago is staggering. I do still hope things can change for the better. Unfortunately, it alone is not much motivation for doing things. Square, lose the ball. Now, I'm tired, I'm married, I'm gonna go do that. And I'll see you guys in a minute. Till then.
Assassin's Creed Shadows release date is getting closer and closer as time passes, and it's filling me with some dread. Because I could already tell that once this game finally releases, it's going to be one of the biggest moments in the culture war, so to speak, in a long time. Everything about this game has been meticulously documented by the internet to borderline autistic detail. From the consultant to specialize in young boys loving older men. That's real, by the way, not making that up, unfortunately. Or how Ubisoft has been caught stealing art without consent and more. It's all a really big mess. I feel like I'm walking through actual doo-doo water every time I decide to dive back into the world of Ubisoft and their business when I make these videos. But today it's going to be even more bad news for Ubisoft and the people who like Assassin's Creed. After spending somewhere in the ballpark of $300 million plus to make this game happen, now their own investors are going into it the worst it is. And after all this ass-street business, I also want to talk about some other devs that are still not willing to budge amidst the whole culture war to their own detriment. But first, from IGN, Ubisoft shareholder blocked protests outside Paris headquarters, accuses company of failing to reveal discussions with Microsoft, Electronic Arts and others allegedly interested in acquiring intellectual properties. So, a stakeholder in Ubisoft is allegedly attempting to stage a boycott and threatening to sue the company for basically keeping investors out of the conversation when it comes to the future of the company in ways that will really matter as you're about to see. This boycott is being pushed by Juraj Krupa, the CEO of AJ Investments. As IGN states here, Juraj Krupa claimed that Ubisoft is horribly mismanaged by current management and wants a clear roadmap for recovery from the senior team to address declining shareholder value, lackluster operational execution, and failure to adapt effectively to market trends. One of the things that Krupa blasts Ubisoft for well before the Shadows nonsense was actually making partnerships with Saudi Arabian groups, notably Savvy Group when it came to DLC partnerships with one of their previous games, Assassin's Creed Mirage. So Krupa is saying that Ubisoft has an alleged history, according to them, of not letting investors know what they're doing with the company, despite said investors, investing in the company in the first place. I think Krupa is right to feel this way. If I knew that I was giving thousands or millions of dollars to a group, and then they were just making decisions on what to do with my money and not letting me in on it, yeah, I think I'd be pretty pissed too. But this next part made me raise my eyebrow like The Rock, where they say this. The shareholder also pointed to a restricted article published by business investment platform Merger Market that alleged discussions between Microsoft, Electronic Arts, and others that are interested in acquiring IPs from Ubisoft. Management did not inform public about these steps further, Krupa claimed. Wait, hold on a second. So you're telling me despite Shadows coming out, which the pro Ubisoft people are telling me, is definitely going to save the company and bring them back to prominence, that behind the scenes Ubisoft has been discussing selling off their IPs to other parties. Does this sound like a company that has a financial secure future to you guys? Why would Ubisoft be even entertaining the idea of selling off things like Rainbow Six, which by the way, their most profitable game of all time is Rainbow Six Siege, or Rayman, or Splinter Cell, and more if they had a good feeling that Shadows would indeed save them? This just tells me that Shadows is not a last hurrah attempt to save Ubisoft games. If they're already having these discussions behind closed doors with cheats and seats already, this means that they know, despite whatever Shadows ends up selling, that they're essentially cooked is what it means. You don't sell your bread and butter that keeps the sandwich together if you aren't to some capacity fully aware that you're cooked in some way going forward. Dude, this is so bad. Oh my god. Let's hold up a second. Selling to Microsoft of all people? Hello? How many times has the company been sold to Microsoft when the quality of their games and such go from decent or good to abysmal in record time? Almost all of them to be exact. The only smart purchase on Microsoft's part was actually Activision. But that's only because according to here, Activision has attributed to about 85% of Xbox's sales since buying them, which kind of means that without Call of Duty under Microsoft's belt, their Xbox division was, making peanuts prior. But largely speaking, Microsoft doesn't really cultivate many of their studios, and they've been criticized aplenty for this too. So them now allegedly wanting to buy Splinter Cell and more, yeah, not a good idea for those franchises, obviously. I mean, unless you just want future games in those series and more to all just be 6 or 5 out of 10 experiences that are shadows of their former selves, then sure, I guess. Anyway, following this AJ investment attempting to push their boycott onto Ubisoft ended up issuing a statement to IGN over this whole thing, which reads, as I mentioned during our quarterly sales, the pursuit of various transformational, strategic, and capitalistic options is ongoing. The board has established a independent committee overseeing this normal and competitive process, so as to extract the best value from Ubisoft's assets and franchises for all stakeholders. Ubisoft will inform the market in accordance with applicable regulations if and when the transaction materializes. Oh my god, that's so many big words. It's all just corporate gobbledygook for everyone to shut up while they're trying to make as much money as possible for our failing franchises, pretty much. I mean, come on, guys. Back in October 2024, even, Ubisoft entertained the idea of going private, with Tencent buying them outright, pretty much. And I'm telling you guys, this reality is becoming the outcome more and more with each passing day. Even though the family that owns Ubisoft since its inception, the Guillemot, or however you pronounce it, family, has been trying to stall Tencent from obtaining the company for a long time now. They even attempted to offer a deal where Tencent would get a majority stake in Ubisoft, but the Guillemot family would still be in charge of stuff like Assassin's Creed as well. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. If Tencent ends up owning Ubisoft, there's no way they're going to allow the Guillemot family, or anyone for that matter, to just stick around and make any decisions for their future games, since Ubisoft has, for a while time now, been pushing what can only be described as pro-woke propaganda in many of their games, which coincidentally is why so many of those games have failed too. Why would Tencent want to keep the people in charge of the company they want to buy that, in their infinite wisdom, caused the very downfall of that company in the first place? It makes absolutely zero sense at all. But the Ubisoft boycott by this investment firm is not a good thing for Ubisoft so close to Shadow's release. This is not the time where Ubisoft should have to spend time, putting out fires, because they really need to focus on ensuring that Shadows is as big of a success as humanly possible on release. But the fact that they're going out of their way to try to say that any boycott rumors are fake is the worst one possible. Because you don't sell your best products from your control if your company has the future. I could see them maybe selling 1 or 2 IPs like that, but a fire sale of everything they own to all sorts of companies, especially Rainbow Six. This doesn't fill me with confidence that Ubisoft as a brand will be staying in the long run. Their best case scenario is that Tencent buys them completely but retains the name Ubisoft when pushing their games. But in my opinion, if Tencent does end up buying them, they will likely just erase that name from history. Because, let's be honest, at this point, hearing the name Ubisoft coming attached with anything, there's a lot of baggage there, unfortunately. I mean, you have Twitter accounts like this one called Assassin's Creed News, where they're celebrating that Shadows is currently number 5 on the best-selling games for PS5. Wow, that must be great, right? Well, if you look at the actual numbers, it tells a different story. Here's the thing in case you don't know. In Japan, companies are legally obligated to publicly show exactly how many copies of any product gets sold in their markets. This is done on purpose to ensure that there's no swindling or fake news, so to speak, when it comes to reporting things. So if your game sold like ass, you can't just say, actually, we're doing great. Maybe you can swindle that in the West or somewhere else, but in Japan, it's a no. Anyways, Shadows is number 5, right? Well, according to Bunbury Oto, who actually looked into the raw numbers of sales for each of these games presented here, it's a big difference. So, Monster Hunter Wilds is number 1 and has sold around 70,000 plus copies on PS5, in Japan I mean. That might not sound like a lot, but please remember that console games don't really sell like they do over here in the West, but 70k for your new game is a lot in Japan on one platform. But now here's the big huge dip. Second place here is Split Fiction, and it has sold just over 1,000 copies in Japan for PS5. As you can see, that's a massive drop from first to second place. So Shadows is in 5th, right? How many copies has it sold? A whopping 700 or so copies have been pre-ordered in Japan for Shadows as of the making of this video. So sure, when the game releases, it could become number 1, but the difference between 5 and 2 is a measly 300 units anyways. And I don't think 700 units sold in Japan is really going to save Ubisoft. That's just $49,000 in sale in Japan alone for Shadows. Well, without tax, of course, then it's over 50k in total, but that's abysmally bad considering that your game is kind of poised to portray that part of the world and its history, and the actual people who live there can't even seem to be bothered to pre-order your game over 1,000 times in their country. This is why it's important to actually look into things. Otherwise, this would look great on paper when in actuality, it's horrible. This AJ Investments that is planning this boycott of Ubisoft has blasted the company for declining profits, cratering stocks, and what they call outright lies from the company as a whole. Krupa, who runs AJ Investments, said in a statement that Ubisoft's lack of care for their IP and company has caused severe stock declines, which harmed mostly retail investors that have limited resources to manage their positions accordingly. Krupa also stated that if their conclusion effectively enhances shareholder value, we will call off the demonstration. Otherwise, AJ Investments also declared it's ready to sue the company for misleading investors. So this boycott that AJ Investments is planning will run for a few months, it seems, and they are very pissed off with how Ubisoft is handling things. So best case scenario is that Shadows blows up, does amazing, saves Ubisoft, very unlikely, but a possibility, or doesn't do well enough at all. Like I said in my previous video, Shadows needs to sell at least 7 million copies to break even on game dev costs alone, which means that the game needs to be a Monster Hunter Wilds level release to not even make money technically out of the gate, but just make enough to give the investors back their money they invested pretty much over all those years. Then anything after that is technically profitable. But the company is barely even worth $1 billion now, which, yeah, is a lot of money, I know. But in the gamble of companies, it's a small fry compared to its competition. For an example, Sony PlayStation is worth well over 60 times what Ubisoft currently is. Case in point, that if even PlayStation is not unbreakable to the damages of activism and social change via hiring of activists and allowing their games to run amok in their walls, what hope do you truly believe that Ubisoft, of all people, would have when they've been cultivating this level of insanity for well over a decade now? Remember that Sweet Baby Inc. was not started out of nowhere. It was founded by 2 former Ubisoft developers that ended up splintering off and creating this consulting studio that now operates primarily out of Montreal, Quebec, the same place that Ubisoft has their main offices for the company. And I mean, Ubisoft has sadly become a massive supporter of things like Sweet Baby Inc. and that sort of stuff in gaming over the last 2 years, and I have no doubts that Sweet Baby to some degree worked on Shadows, but Ubisoft panicked and erased their names from involvement during the development. I also wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if we were to find out that well after the game has already come out, but it saddens me that people really do believe that Ubisoft can somehow turn this entire fiasco around into a win in the future. Like guys, you need to understand how deep the rot is within Ubisoft right now. When you have graduates coming into your company in droves to work there that have been legit raised on things like gender studies and such within how they make video games from the get-go, and now you're telling them 1 to maybe 5 years after they've been making games that the things they've come to know as fact are suddenly no longer valid at the company. These developers at places like Ubisoft have effectively, for lack of a better term, been groomed, so to speak, to make games that are, let's be real, destined to fail. But in their minds, these games don't fail because of their mindsets or their skills, because they're in echo chambers. They live and breathe and are constantly validated that the things that they know and say are true, because everyone is just as delusional as they are. And whether the entire group is wrong, if you get enough of them together in one place repeating one another, any lie can become a reality in space. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's tons of devs who worked on Shadow that are perplexed by the outcome of how fans reacted to it, or any other Ubisoft for that matter. These things are made in a vacuum under veil. And by the time that it gets officially announced, these people have been submerged in the rumors that happened through years of undiscovery. Again, the fact that these devs are hopefully coming to realize how cooked the company they work for is, that when it gets sold, it's not going to be sold to, say, another studio or publisher that enjoys pushing this sort of thing. The only way that that happens is if Microsoft somehow buys Ubisoft, which is unlikely, but Microsoft pushes that stuff too. So the activism, so to speak, could stay and keep going if that were to happen. But if Tencent buys them, dude, China doesn't allow for feminine men or masculine women in their media, and I mean, that's a lot of what Ubisoft pushes nowadays. Especially the masculine female archetype. It's all over all of their franchises. Just go pick one, it's everywhere. Personally, if anyone is going to fix Ubisoft franchises, it can't really be Ubisoft themselves, because they are just lost this point. And like I showed you, the fact that they're having discussions of selling off IP and not telling their investors about it beforehand, are you kidding me? Anyone who invests will tell you how big of a no-no that is. Again, need I repeat myself? The actions of Ubisoft here amidst this looming boycott and potential lawsuits are not the actions of a healthy company that has its ascendancy in its sights. These are the actions of a company that knows that its time is limited, and the executives here are just trying to fill their pockets as much as they can with anything they can get rid of, so that once the building does go into flames, they can just escape and jump off with their golden parachutes and live their lives in luxury. And at that point, what the industry will be left with is a sea of unemployed developers that are raising a dying agenda that can't really fathom why any of this happened in the first place, when all they were doing was acting in their nature the whole time as they were happy. And when it comes to Ubisoft, there is no real position to be making demands of anybody. And speaking of demands, let's use BattleTech as a more recent example. So to give you more examples of how these things can go so poorly, so BattleTech is like Warhammer, kind of, but somehow even more pandering when it comes to identity stuff in that space. Well, they recently claimed that their failure in sales and such to not be their own fault. Instead, it's Trump's and the tariffs. Yes, I'm being serious. BattleTech is ran and operated by Catalyst Game Labs. And here's what they said on their own website. Like many of you, the Catalyst Game Labs team have been watching recent economic developments. We have been hard at work developing strategies that would make our position more resilient to the rapidly changing world trade dynamics that we have been seeing. Like much of the tabletop gaming industry, Catalyst gets hit especially hard by trade tariffs. Our industry is inherently international in nature. We are lucky that we've been able to be flexible in pricing in the past decade. However, recent changes in the market have shown us that our flexibility is not quite prepared for a change of this magnitude. With the current level of economic uncertainty, we have to make some tough decisions in the next 60 days. We'll be releasing a comprehensive update for this process, including some unfortunately necessary price adjustments. These price adjustments will apply to new products and product blueprints that are directly affected by tariffs. As we adjust this new situation, we will likely expand the policy across our entire product line in order to average out increases. We are working hard to ensure that we can keep or even improve our value contribution to you and your game neighbors. We have prided ourselves on maintaining our relationship with you and your local game stores through Catalyst Game Labs history, and we would hope to continue that trend in the years to come. The CGL team would like to thank you for sticking around, blah, 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 and you get the point. Catalyst and Battletech are in the dumps financially pretty much right now. But it doesn't surprise me because, like Ubisoft, they alienated their core fan base for a massive push towards leftist LGBTQ+ people instead. As seen here back in 2022 from Bounding Into Comics, Battletech writer and New York Times best-selling author Blaine Pardoe canceled by publisher over false claims made by online stalkers. So the former lead writer for Battletech got fired and canceled by someone who was stalking him online. You get the stalker? They ended up replacing him at Battletech who was writing the article. No, I'm not kidding. In an open letter that Pardoe said to the corporate cowardice and the minority of left-wing woke whiners alienates conservative fans, the fans need to speak with their money and remind publishers who they really answer to. Further things. After 37 years of writing for the series, I found myself canceled for voicing night conservative fans. Why I'm bringing this up in the video, that it's primarily about Ubisoft is simple. I want to convey to you how it doesn't matter what your product is. Whether it's Assassin or Mechanized Warrior, nothing is immune to the identity political virus if you let these types in. And now with these tariffs, Battletech is cooked. They will become overpriced while still hating anyone who doesn't agree with them politically if they want to engage with their make-believe world. Even another game dev which made a game called Sandwich attacked people like Grumps, so Grumps got into a public scout with Ubisoft. And here's what Sandwich's devs have to say about it. Thank you, Assassin's Creed social media person. I'm proud of you. F that fastest piece of SHIT. Grumps would then respond with this. I thought this indie game was well made, Caravan Sandwich, but randomly out of the blue, the devs decided to name drop me for clout to own the chuds. I never mentioned the game. I think indie games that want to be woke should do so, but instead they decided to pick a fight. Turns out they are trying to make it so that modders can't mod out pride flags and are making it political in their tweets and marketing and trying to insult everyone at the same time. It's too bad, cute game, but the devs have massive brain rot. Don't buy games from devs that hate you. Look, the point of all of this is that when you shove activism into your games, it doesn't work 99% of the time. These devs, whether it's these Sandwich devs or the Battletech people or just Ubisoft in general, they pushed activism before profits and they are now reaping the whirlwind in return. None of this was being done for the right reasons, except that the activists believe that they could get away with all of it. Of course, Ubisoft is far larger than either of these examples, but the point still stands. If even one of the big mighty game publishers can fall due to opening their gates to morons who don't care about video games, is there really any hope for these smaller dev studios? And the fact that Ubisoft's own investors are so fed up that they've reached a point where they want to tear down the company is proof alone that this way of doing things, it just cannot last. So if you're an investor in Ubisoft, I hope whatever Tencent buys them that you get your money's worth. But as for Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft is teetering on the brink of collapse right now, and it's no one's fault but their own. Thank you for watching, subscribe, have a great day.
I feel like myself again.
There has now been another massive blow to the multi-headed Hydra that is incredible amounts of funds have now been discovered to be used to push even more corruption within the different facets of society. And after I show you, there's even more copium when it comes to Avowed, this all connects somehow too. And then the director of Avowed now has things to say, and a BioWare veteran is very, very mad at how things like Veilguard ended up. Firstly, in case you don't know, Elon Musk's Doge team has been combing through the United States branch to see where all this money has been going from USA. To catch you up quickly, the USA was used for years by corrupt enterprises to artificially every single known facet of society by using American taxpayer money to fund ridiculous programs like giving condoms to people in Afghanistan, for example. That was one of the wildest expenses. Now the New York Post has this article, Elon Musk's Doge for PI chopping block with termination of over $370 million in education department grants. According to Doge, about 70 BI grants were suffered in this way. As one grand mission statement was provided, the money was used to teach teachers to engage in ongoing learning and self-reflection to confront their own biases and racism and develop asset-based anti-racist mindsets. Another grant, which spent $9.7 million of American taxpayer money, was used to fund a cohort of Cambodian youth with enterprise-driven skills. Yes, these are real things being done with money from America by woke idiots who were in power. This isn't all idle. As the official USA government website states in their article, U.S. Department of Education cuts over $600 million in divisive teacher training grants. Some of these mission statements that again costed over $600 million somehow to kids in American society included receiving professional development workshops and equity training to topics such as building cultural competence, dismantling racial bias, and centering equity in the classroom. Another was for building historical and socio-political understanding of race and racism to interrupt racial marginalization and oppression of students in planning instruction, relationship building, discipline, and assessment. As you can see, like I proved in other videos about, like talking about stuff like this entire woke movement and agenda is being gutted by these cuts. It's about damn time, folks. They've wasted so much money on things that have done nothing but just create a weaker society and piss poor products. And these grants have been leaking into video games aplenty as well. The past 4.5 years of development and releases are prime examples of how these sorts of ludicrous spending has led to nothing but the complete and utter slop of content that is being forced down players' throats. This brings us to Avowed, which the entire gaming media press has been in full damage control trying to claim that this game is doing very well when in reality
Maximum Pulse!
Currently, as of this video being released, Avowed has only reached 17,000 players on Steam. These are paid players, as in full price, since Game Pass doesn't get allocated into the Steam number, of course. But it's pathetic how a mere day or two after release officially, and Avowed's player counts concurrently have already been practically slashed in half already. But this game is doing great, guys. Just avoid the fact that it is actually currently sitting at number 89 on the most played games currently on Steam. And other games like Euro Squad, Euro Truck Simulator 2, and even the original Humble, they all have more players concurrently playing them than Avowed does at this very moment. Even Russian Fishing 4 is beating Avowed. Oh boy, yeah, it's bad. Granted, you've seen it, and Microsoft probably believe that their new GI slot game is much better than this. After all, as you can see here, Microsoft even went ahead and got an Avowed advertisement running non-stop in Times Square in New York City. This ad probably costed almost as much money as Microsoft has made in paid copies of Avowed so far, which is frankly pathetic, but hey, this is what happens when you make slop. And as more people begin to discover Avowed for what it really is, it's getting far more laughable the more people discover. Here's Twitter user Rock Solid trying out Avowed as they streamed it, and I mean, just look at this.
Wait, no one's walking in the town. They're all standing still. Wait.
Maximum Pulse!
Is there anyone walking? Wait.
They're right behind you.
There's no one walking. Every NPC in the town is standing still.
I like the cold.
Oh my god.
Rebirth is a mutant's greatest gift.
Mind you,
This is a critical mission. Only 60 seconds left.
NPCs in Daggerfall
Get that
walked
vehicle
around the
moving
town
again.
and had like patterns that they would walk in. Not a single person is walking.
Much better.
They're all just static NPCs. Oh my god. That's actually crazy.
This is one of those things where once you notice it, you can't unnotice it anymore. The world is literally nothing moves at all. Everything is stagnant. NPCs are forever speaking floor where they stand. It's very pathetic and honestly ridiculous to see that this is a modern game. For a more recent comparison, here's me playing Kingdom Come 2. As you can see, I am just walking around Kudasai, looking at NPCs to show you how the world here feels far more alive compared to Avowed. Some NPCs are standing around, sure, but many others have their daily routines and consistently talk and go about their business every single day. Some NPCs are shown building things, others are hammering a nail, carrying baskets that are full of fresh fruit. And while, yes, none of these worlds are real per se, it's up to the developers to, of course, sell you the idea that you are living in the reality of the real world. And it's honestly frankly sad to see absolute sustainable seeding is done here up against Kingdom 2. Look, I have plenty of problems with Kingdom Come 2, but their NPC reactiveness is not good. In fact, I would say that its ability to sell you that is one of its strongest points. Unfortunately, the game also has probably one of the most condescending characters I've seen in a game in a long time, the form of Musa Amali, who spends the entirety of his time while speaking in Kingdom Come 2 just claiming that he is better than you in every single way. Musa insults Henry's culture, his food, his people, and pretty much all of their customs, and claims that Musa's people and religion, that being Islamic, are better than Henry's in every way. The game doesn't even really give you the option to combat Musa in his beliefs. And the whole thing just kind of comes across as completely tone-deaf and stupid, if I'm being honest. Not to mention being out of place in this game as well, but being tone-deaf and not understanding what players want, that seems to be the de facto way of doing things when you make video games these days, from a Western perspective anyways. For an example, did you know that Avowed has no relationships or romance options in the game either? Yeah, a game that Obsidian has released in 2025, yet again, does not feature entire systems that they have implemented into plenty of their other games before this. Now I know some people don't care for romance or find it unnecessary in the grand scheme of an RPG. However, to play devil's advocate here, I would say that implementing romance options into your big RPG game is usually a net positive only. For an example, Mass Effect, Baldur's Gate 3, and even the older Dragon Age games, they all have romance options in them. Again, some of you may not care for these systems, but the reality is that if your game has these systems, it can and will create a feedback loop where players who become invested in these sorts of games will indeed come back and constantly replay them, not only to pick different choices story-wise, but to roleplay a new character that may romance Lae'zel in Baldur's Gate, but another run could be Shadowheart, or Will, or Astarion even in that game alone. These systems, which may seem somewhat plain on the surface, are an integral mechanic that can keep a single-player game's longevity far exceeding its shelf life, due to how these affect and react to the player's options in the game. And to prove my point, here's the current Steam player count numbers for Baldur's Gate 3, which as you can see, the game is entering its second year, and currently has about 4 times the player count that Avowed has. Of course, the player choice is not just romance related. You can do all kinds of reactive choice-based stuff in Baldur's Gate 3, but the romance options have clearly been a big selling point of a game like BG3, which is why people will come back for more in the future. In Avowed's case, since the world is not reactive and there is no romance options whatsoever, once you beat that game, you have frankly zero reason to ever replay it. Unless you want to, I guess, run a full mage or warrior build, but at that point, there's far better games on the market that do this exact same thing. But here's what the director of Avowed had to say about romance options not being put into Avowed. Here's what she said, speaking to IGN.
Not boyfriend, then why boyfriend shaped?
I think obviously there are skillful ways to do it, but I think it is easy for romance mechanics to undermine that core experience by creating something that then becomes something players will metagame. My hope with players and their companion relationships in Avowed is that they would feel natural, and players would get out of them exactly what they want and exactly as much as they put in. That it's not something where they're saying, I'm going to have every conversation, with this character, I'm going to collect all these things and, shower my companion with gifts, in the hopes of maximizing a relational meter of some kind. They say, no, you know what, if I find this character interesting, we're sitting around the campfire, I'm going to talk to him, I'm going to talk to her, we're going to get to know each other, and that it feels like a fluid relationship. People still love the Parvati interaction that you get in the bar in The Outer Worlds, and I think what they love about it is that there's something very charming and believable and lifelike about it. And that's what I wanted players to experience with their companions, is this sense that you're getting to know some new friends. And sometimes you're challenging them, sometimes they're challenging you.
So from the get-go, the director says that romance mechanics can undermine the experience. I disagree a lot of it. Romance mechanics eventually ties the player closer to the world they are engaging with on a meaningful and emotional level. Because in RPG games, choices, of course, at points where characters could be placed in conflict. Maybe not in Avowed's case to say the same level as something like Mass Effect or real Dragon Age games or Baldur's Gate perhaps, but this still tracks. Seeing their romance options go through their quest, potentially being harmed or imprisoned, etc. would understandably hint an emotional reaction from the player if they are invested in the settings for responsibility. So already, what this director said just feels like poking, if I'm being honest. The director also says they hope that the relationships between the companions and the envoy would feel natural, but let's be real, nothing about Avowed feels natural. In fact, it's the opposite. Everything feels like it's Fisher-Price made, locked into place like I showed with Rock Solid's video earlier already. It would be more natural to allow the player to explore their options, and romance whoever they want, I guess. But making them just end without romance, you not only don't have a reason to play between different outcomes, but it just makes everything feel lamer, you know? Romance is a big thing, guys. Again, I know some of you may not like it, but it can be understood how important the system are in video games, regardless of what your eyes of the is. Also, the fact that the director brought up Parvati from Outer Worlds just kind of shows how tone-deaf of an answer it was. Because people love Parvati in Outer Worlds. She's canonically lesbian, can't be romanced by male characters, which was a bummer, let me tell you. But the fact that you were able to romance her at all is why people resonated with that character. Also, she was well written, for Avowed's art. For an example, when I saw Liara in the Mass Effect teaser trailer that came out a few years ago, that teaser meant more to me than say others, because my Shepard romanced Liara in all three games. So when I saw Liara, my love interest, pick up that piece of the N7 armor that may or may not belong to my Shepard, that moment hit me like a truck, because I'm immediately met with a wave of emotion and gameplay moments, because I experienced that all of that with Liara at the side. In that way, Liara to me seems more like a real person, not only because she has great writing and voice acting, but because I was able to, of my own free will, romance this character that I cared about more than, say, the other options. What Obsidian has done here is pretty much just gutted their RPG experience to be fenced in, lack creativity, and now, to add injury and insult, lack the interactive nature that games like these are known for. You lose nothing by having a romance option system in your game, but by removing it entirely, you lose a big reason why people could connect with this character. Then tell me why the BioWare online store keeps running out of stock when it comes to items that are involving Holly and Garrus specifically. Like, look at this, guys. Look how many of these items on BioWare's store are completely out of stock. And you will notice the correlation here is that it involves two of the most popular romance options in the Mass Effect games. Seriously, you want to hear a woman gush in real life who's played Mass Effect? Go ask her what she thinks of Garrus Vicarian, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Dude, I bought my girlfriend the trilogy of Mass Effect games when I met her. She never played them before. I didn't tell her nothing, besides the fact that the choices that she makes continues on into the next game. I didn't influence her, I didn't tell her who to romance, none of that. I wanted her to experience those games as blind as you can from the get-go. And lo and behold, who did my girlfriend gravitate towards and romance all the way through? Garrus Vicarian, of course. Like always, it's Garrus every single time when it comes to women and Mass Effect romance. Now you tell me if all that merchandise BioWare has sold out of would sell at the same level if Garrus or Tali or romance in general was not available in Mass Effect. I guarantee you that they would sell a fraction of these things in comparison, but this is what I mean. Romance options in your video games, when paired with good writing, mind you, which Avowed also doesn't have, it goes beyond just the realm of the digital world that you created as an experience for players. it
3,
stays with those players.
2,
It permeates.
1.
It evolves into fan art,
All you need to do
cosplay,
is capture
fan
the
fiction.
mission
It
area.
can easily be
Got it?
translated into tangible
I
out-of-game
hope this is
sales like
important.
BioWare has
Reed and I had a
masterfully
date
done when
night
it comes to
planned.
Mass Effect and fans' unhealthy obsession with Tali or Garrus. Whereas if you go look up Dragon Age stuff on BioWare Store, all the things that are tied to the better older games are also sold out. Sure, some of the Build-Guard stuff is also sold out, but a lot of what is being sold out is still tied to the legacy characters that are also available. Like the Fen Morel stuff being sold out. That's Solus from Inquisition originally. So people are buying that because of this connection to that game and Build-Guard. By the way, Solus is also romanceable in Inquisition if you play a female elf. For example, of how romance can lead to average sales. This is what I mean. Nobody is going to want to buy the full body pillars of say Kai or Marius in the God. Garrus and Tali, I can't find it on BioWare Store anymore, but they did have those pillows on their online store for years. And I kid you not, anytime I went on the online store to look at things, they were consistently always sold out. And I wouldn't be surprised if they inevitably come back to their store this year again too, due to how well they sell. And before someone calls me a liar, here you go. The Garrus Vicarian body pillow went on sale in 2021 and immediately sold out. GameSpot even did an article when it was on sale, by the way. And here's the Tali body pillow as well, which, yes, as you may guess, it also sold out in 2022. The point I made is that what these modern game developers are realizing is that you should absolutely cater to the audience and their needs, because it can only lead to further sales and ways to keep the studio well fed and stocked in the future. I guarantee you that BioWare's merch alone is probably a big reason why Electronic still hasn't closed them despite multiple losses. Because their online store probably makes them thousands in sales every month easily, and it's basically just free money that is printing without having to really lift a finger. The only game that has successfully replicated the actions of, say, Mass Effect or the older Dragon Ages is probably Baldur's Gate 3. But this director for Avowed is just coping with such a massive loss of opportunity, and it's no wonder that, again, Avowed is currently sitting at number 89 on the most played games mere days after release on Steam. That's really bad, guys. When your world is just not worth exploring, isn't reactive, or has romance options and all the other bells and whistles, then what, dear viewer, is the point of spending your time in such a world to begin with? What Avowed has ended up becoming is sadly very similar to Mailshot, although somehow even less so, as it's garnering 1/4 the player base of that under Fire. Recently, Mark Guerra, a BioWare veteran who worked on every single video on his own personal YouTube channel, and then PC Gamer reported on it. BioWare veteran calls on the cruelty of fans you're probably attacking the wrong person anyway. Guerra says that the history of Veilguard is misguided, but I disagree. Many people, myself included, bought that game to experience a world that we love, and instead we found a horrific parody of something that's supposed to be called fantasy. Mark Guerra says at one point that it's okay to be mad at the publisher, but not specific to devs. He uses this as an example. Be mad at Ubisoft. Express your anger to Ubisoft or the studio that made the game, but you cross the line when you start being cruel about it. You don't need to go out of your way to cause harm to other people because the video game continues. All of this isn't to say that you aren't allowed to have your own opinion if you don't like the things you don't like, says Daryl. It's specifically the point that if you are angry at a specific person, you attack a specific person and often misdirect. Well, in the case of Veilguard, it's also the people who got the most criticism were people who were outspoken against the players and wanted to push their own moronic beliefs despite the criticisms. In Veilguard's case, this was a push against a person who has a history of pushing for trans surgery scars and character creators, and ensuring that any game they push on includes sensible amount of trans representation when such things before were kept to a minimal in previous games. There's one single trans character in Inquisition who is a member of Ironforge's team. Besides that, these things are never mentioned in that series. Then you have Stan in Dragon Age Origins, who even mocked the whole concept of gender identity in Origins.
Stand. You look like a woman. Flirting. I don't know this word. Speak the comments on it. You are a Grey Warden, so it follows that you can't be a woman. Women are priests, artisans, shopkeepers, or farmers. They don't fight. Why would women ever wish to be men? That makes no sense. They also wish to live on the moon. That's as attainable. One of those things can't be true. A person is born, Denari or human or elven or dwarf. He doesn't choose that. The size of his hands, whether he is clever or foolish, the land he comes from, the color of his hair, These are beyond his control. We do not choose, we simply are.
So, I'm non-binary. I like the cool.
Starts a conversation like that. I just sat down.
A game, by the way, that Mark Dara, who is now trying to defend Veilguard, was a part of and developed himself. In the case of Avowed, their director hasn't said anything problematic per se, but they just more so have been making excuses for why things like a reactive world or romance were not integral to the development of the game, and the player counts are reflecting that. However, in Avowed's case, I think the criticism targeted at Matt Hansen, the art director, who has openly stated that he only hires black people, does not hire whites, and hates conservatives, you ask me, that does cross a line. And I think what Mark Dara of BioWare is saying here, he may think he's in the right, but he really isn't. Avowed's reputation was not caused by what Dara might believe to be online grifters. No, it was caused by the actions of Matt Hansen, the art director of Avowed. Had he kept his mouth shut and not attacked people publicly, this would all be a different situation. But to try to defend the actions of these people who so clearly hate the player bases they are tasked with catering to, then having their vitriol be met with an equal level of criticism thrown back at them, and then you have people like Mark Dara acting like the devs on these games are the victims in these scenarios is ridiculous to me. Nobody who bought or played Dragon Age, or I guess Avowed, even from a player perspective, pushed these games to promote transgender ideology, or remove things like romance options, or hire people who hate white people so vehemently despite being white themselves. These are all the opinions and decisions chosen by these developers of these RPG games of their own volition. If I could somehow travel through time like a Flash and sit there with Veilguard where it's being pitched, I would actually try and have a lot to say as to why they shouldn't have gone the way that they did, clearly. But you can't try to paint the developers of this studio as victims when the end result that was released is nothing short of a bastardization of a franchise that people love. And then try to act like somehow the players are at fault for what exists within a video game they had no hand in making in the first place. How does that make any sense? This is like Mark Dara serving me a pizza that's covered in maggots and blood, and I say, I'm not eating that, and then Mark Dara goes, why do you have to be so mean to the people who make this pizza? Like, bro, I'm the customer. Why are you giving me garbage when you expect me to pay you full price regardless of the quality of the display? It's insane. Avowed and Veilguard are prime examples of how to never make a modern RPG game going forward in any capacity. Credit where it's due, sure, Avowed's combat is fun, and that's good. Should take that part of the value and keep it when they make future games. But the biggest issue with these games when they're placed up against the worlds they come from, Dragon Age and Space Eternity and Avowed, is that the core of these games are being created and designed by people who frankly don't seem to know what players really want. And instead they're too enclosed in their own little echo chamber bubbles to realize that their making will only cater to a great minority of players at best. As this one content creator said on Twitter, Avowed is so generic and made by AI. Here's what Trump said about Mark Dara defending devs who make stupid games about dumb things. Tell that to the devs who are posting anti-white hatred attacks on viewers and death threats to bloggers. Exactly this. You can't defend the actions of these very mentally deranged individuals just because their jobs are in the games industry. We need to gut all of this, and that's kind of the point of this video. The kind of woke agenda movement, whatever you want to call it, is getting gutted right now. I know, I'm not already. But at a commercial level, these games are also being rejected outright as well. Even Arthur Biorowski, a game dev, spoke on the Mark Dara thing. Here's what he said. As always, players criticizing the industry are an irrelevant, loud minority until layoffs come. People stick to their dev bubble, where such sentiment is prevalent, and their customers are considered enemies. Well, they lost big time and still learned nothing. And that's exactly it. In the end, these devs have learned absolutely nothing from their mistakes. And they keep proving time and again that they will just continue to keep serving the same slop regardless because they just truly do believe that they are in the right. Despite the loss of sales regularly from the first playoffs, not exist had they not attacked players first or pushed ideology through their heart would exist in the first place. None of it works. This is, as always, was simply activists that are mad that they are held accountable for their own actions finally. And now that they are, it's suddenly a problem. Woe is me. We should instead just allow them to what? Destroy every single franchise that we hold dear, otherwise we're the biggest. Make it make sense. It makes zero sense. All of this just makes about as much sense as making a sequel to Inquisition that sidelines Solus, or making a Pillars of Eternity spin-off game where all the reactivity, choices, and romance options that are in those games already are suddenly now stripped of it, yet you're expected to play it and enjoy it regardless of quality and pay full price if you play it on Steam. These devs may think they're in the right, but all they're really doing is destroying everything that these franchises stood for. And because of that failure to realize when they've lost, the gutting will continue. But thank you for watching, subscribe, thanks for being here, I'll see you in the next one. We've now reached the point where the entire Avowed saga has entered the actually it's doing very well for us, please believe us part of the news cycle as the code begins to spread and websites continue to run damage control for Obsidian. And I also want to talk about NetEase and how they want to completely dump all Western game devs, and I spoke to someone closely tied to this, and this is not good, fellas. This could literally be a woke apocalypse. Firstly, Avowed. Jason Schreier, a journalist who hates Gamergate despite being owned by it every time he brings it up, has spoken to Obsidian about Avowed. In his article here, where he spoke to the game's director, Avowed is confirmed to have taken 6 years in total to make, and was originally a multiplayer take on Skyrim. After 2 years of development, Avowed was internally rebooted according to Obsidian from this multiplayer take into a more traditional single-player game. This is when Kerry Patel, the current game director, came on to salvage the project into what it is now. This part made me laugh, so the day that Obsidian decided to sit down and discuss Avowed's future following the multiplayer shift to single player, it was on January 6, 2021. Here's what Bloomberg said about that. Then the headlines began popping up. There was violence taking place on the other side of the country. At the US Capitol in Washington, D.C., what was normally a procedural vote to certify the winner of the presidential election had turned into chaos. It was January 6, 2021, and Obsidian's big day was being overshadowed by a riot. Obsidian decided to reschedule the all-hands meeting for later in the week. It was honestly a challenge on just about every front, Patel told me during a recent interview. Yeah, it wasn't a riot, Jason. They didn't really destroy anything. They just kind of peacefully walked around, took some pictures, and left. Of course, some escalated it anyways, and then the security people still shot and killed one person, which was wrong in every way to do so. Of course, this would be enough to trigger a room full of woke Western liberal developers to want to bend the knee and not continue working your jobs for the day. These people just seem to find any excuse they can to just not work. What does a so-called Capitol riot, which wasn't a riot, have to do with your job? This is like some guy who's stocking shelves in Canada hearing about the January 6th incident and then telling his boss, "Hey boss, I can't work today. Democracy was under attack and my feelings are now hurt, so I gotta go home." Literally nobody else took time off work when this happened. Oh my god, these current age devs, man, these people. Any excuse they can find, they will. But anyways, let's continue. According to Bloomberg, Obsidian presented prospective buyers with a pitch for Avowed, which the company hoped would be its magnum opus. A cross between Destiny and Skyrim that allowed players to adventure together in a massive fantasy world. Yeah, Avowed is neither Destiny nor Skyrim in terms of quality either way. The only thing Avowed really took from Destiny was its static NPCs that never move, and its barely passable writing to justify why you gotta go kill things for loot. Then this part happens where Obsidian confirmed that they had to scale back even more. They'd have to sacrifice the ambitions of building a Skyrim-style map where players could walk for hours and still not see everything. But for both technological and logistical reasons, that was proving to be an impossible quest. An impossible quest, you say? To do something that Bethesda did, mind you, wrote the blueprint on years ago, not just in Skyrim, but in things like Oblivion and even Morrowind and then some. He wanted these people back. I seriously just believe that these Western video game people, they're regressive in every single way. The things that seemed possible just 10 years ago, they feel as if they have been lost to these new age game developers forever. Did some video game equivalent of like the Library of Alexandria burn down that nobody knows about or talks about? Because why is it so hard to make something that is the same size and scope as Skyrim? You can't say that it's technical reasons because Skyrim had ran on a basic Xbox 360. But you're telling me that these devs, 10 years or so removed with technology 2 generations ahead of what Skyrim is made on, they can't replicate something like this. This is like the first Iron Man movie all over. Bethesda then was Tony Stark in that cave building his first suit. And these new people are the scientists who can't build anything remotely close despite having way more resources. Everything Bloomberg is saying here just kind of sounds like hope to me, and a lack of creative foresight and skill to be the issue more so than the technology or anything else. I'm not saying that Avowed needs to be the the same procedural world like No Man's Sky still runs. But why is the end result a game where everything is static, nothing moves in time, and the world can't accomplish what Skyrim did way before them on lesser hardware? Then again, I shouldn't be surprised since Obsidian is owned by Microsoft now. Remember that Microsoft also owns 343 Industries or Halo Studios now, but it's a and even then, they couldn't even release a playable version of older Halo games as part of the Master Chief Collection to work properly on current day hardware. Full games, mind you, that were already finished and done in every single way by Bungie and 343 or Halo Studios now, couldn't even port these games properly despite being given all of the blueprints, the engines, and everything that came along with those games when Microsoft bought the Halo IP from Bungie and everything that was attached to it. I just think that these newer devs are just, they're not clearly as talented as the old guard. Am I going crazy? Look, I hate to say it, but everything I see coming out of Microsoft and these, it just feels like there's a massive gap in what happened before versus now. It also doesn't make sense since, technically speaking, when Avowed went from multiplayer to what it is now, by then, Microsoft had already bought Bethesda 2, so Obsidian would have had access to Bethesda stuff via Microsoft since they were both owned by them when they reworked the game into a single-player experience. But no, we can't do Skyrim. Best we can do is what we did. Make it make sense, guys. It's like having all the things you need to build a house and then refusing to use it. I just don't understand why sometimes this happens, but let's just continue. Near the end of the interview, Avowed's director pretty much confirms that they want to make more games in that universe using this style. And honestly, I think if Obsidian were to take the criticism apart here from its unreactive world and very boring story of characters, which, let's be real, those are really big red flags, especially since the director is a writer of the universe that this game takes place in to begin with, which brings more concern as to how did you let such bad writing get into your game in the first place, but some things we may never know. But I do think a potential Avowed 2 that fixes all the issues the game has could be a real bang. I think the gameplay is pretty solid, and I said it before in the video. Obsidian
I am ready to put on a show!
So keep that gameplay system, of course, add to it, but you guys did well just in or whatever, that a large majority of what's in this game isn't really interesting, but if you can take that and build on it, this could, hey, one day become something that can become that Obsidian magnum opus, so to speak, or their fantasy New Vegas equivalent. Avowed is in a unique position that is not afforded to most AAA studios of their size, let's be real, because if we were to base the Steam performance on Steam alone, which is dwindling already by the way, Avowed would be cooked, and Obsidian would be hit with massive layoffs. But I always said before that the saving grace of these Microsoft studios is Game Pass. I'm sure that well over 1 million people have probably jumped into Avowed day one on Game Pass. But of course, this is only because Game Pass is what it is. And another thing we have to say, I'm sure there are those who subscribe to the service to play Avowed. I'm sure that exists. I still think they're right now. But I think the big reason why Game Pass has the subscription that it does right now, let's be honest guys, it's not Avowed. It's Call of Duty Black Ops 6 being on there. And Avowed is basically just riding the success that Black Ops brings to the service, because if people are already pretty subscribed to play the latest COD, and then they see that Avowed shows up there, well, they might as well check it out since it's already there, you know? But if I was Obsidian, I would be looking at those numbers and realize those are the actual paying customers for those games, and those numbers are abysmal. And you need to ensure that you can cast a wider net, so to speak, when it comes to the games with PI and all of that slop that Avowed has too. They just aren't doing very much when they exist outside of that Game Pass safety net. Look at Lost Records and the Life is Strange people. Currently on Steam, and this game is new by the way. It has only a bit over 1,000 players playing it on Steam. This is abysmal. And I mean, if you go look at Donut, the studio that made Lost Records, the publisher that owns them, which is also named Donut, their shares are horrible. From 2018 to 2025, their entire existence, they have lost 95.36% of their value since their highest point. That's what happens when people don't buy your game. And while again, Obsidian is owned by Microsoft, if they didn't have the Game Pass parachute to save them, they would be facing similar dire straits. The point here is that the West is not doing well when it comes to making video games these days. I'm sure you know this. But Obsidian is doing themselves no favor, since recently when it comes to my attention that their community animators are also banning people, and I'm not kidding you, here's the ban reason as you can see. User was found engaging in anti-Jewish actions not tolerated on this forum. Plain as day, so you can see it. You couldn't tell the angle of Avowed and Obsidian here. It's right there for all of you to see. Criticize DEI practices in their forums, or diversity, equity, and inclusion if you don't know, you get banned from Avowed forums. It might be a little hard to see, but here's what was said by this user with the banned comment near the bottom. These users were speaking about trans identity and gender-affirming related discussions as they were all tied to Avowed. They're talking about how some games are political, which makes me pretty volatile, but this is no way somehow grounds to ban someone. Again, got banned for being anti-DEI, which is crazy. But at least they are denying that their game is definitely aligned with that sort of stuff, which is probably another reason why it's performing so poorly on Steam. Because players, let's be real, they just don't want to buy stuff. This is real firepower! Out on the Steam forum, racist bigotry won again. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Does your day feel that little bit better knowing a great developer comprised of hard-working folks shut down over this? All because you can't whack off the ugly character designs and cry about war games all the time, but the memo, the game wasn't included in the first place. So let me get this straight. Obsidian is going to shut down because people didn't buy the DI slop thing, but also the game was engaging anyways, because you shouldn't buy it to begin with.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Doesn't that just mean that this guy is confirming that there's not enough DEI slop lovers like yourself out there to realistically support a game that does this sort of thing then? Todd, buddy, you're just making your own argument here and continuing others to settle it. That there isn't a market for boy slop games in the modern era, especially with AAA. Do these people proofread their own arguments before hitting send, or are they all really just, are there just this many low IQ individuals roaming the internet like this without supervision? It's not racist to not want Avowed. Look, I said the combat is fun at least, but the writing, world, character, story, and all of that is slop. That's not racist to say. I've never once mentioned the color of the people's skin in this game as a negative light. I mean, I've made fun of their hair color, mustaches, like whatever the hell this thing is. But thanks to admitting that your love of bad writing and support characters is not enough to truly support a game. I guess they work with right. But as you can see, Avowed is just, they're not setting the world on fire. There is potential here if Obsidian can remove the DEI stuff and just double down on actual good writing and world building for a sequel, but will it happen? I sincerely doubt it if I'm being honest. Obsidian seems to be yet another modern game developer that is completely consumed by activists anyways. So the likelihood that you won't get anything close to New Vegas' quality is very likely, but hey, this stuff is being gutted to a degree as well. So let's now move on to NetEase. You may know them as the developers behind Marvel Rivals. NetEase, however, is a mega huge company situated in China. Besides supporting their own Chinese-made games, they also have a lot of fingers in Western pies as well. As GameFile reports, in an industry earthquake, NetEase plans to cut more all-star game studios. So to start, NetEase invested hugely into Western game developers over the past few years. Some of these included places like Quantum Dream, which I reported on months ago with their Star Wars Eclipse game. And I spoke to people very closely tied to that project, and Eclipse, from what I was told, is a money sink that is taking forever to get made, and it's full of activists. All in all, nearly 20 Western game development studios have been funded by NetEase in the past few years alone. One dev studio, Worlds Untold, which is in Canada, they actually ceased operations after NetEase pulled all the funding. Another studio, a Sweden-based developer called Liquid Swords, also laid off a bunch of people after NetEase pulled funding too, according to GameFile. They also reported that the master plan here for NetEase is to divest and remove funding from pretty much almost all of their Western studios, because according to NetEase, none of these studios are developing anything that is either showing promise or bringing them the results that were promised. Grubbs also spoke on this and said that NetEase isn't just laying off the 60-people Marvel Rivals team, NetEase is also pulling funding from Western and potentially Japanese gaming studios. The CEO is said to be very unsatisfied with Western developers, calling them lazy, entitled, slow, and broke, according to a source that I spoke with. Yeah, so I spoke to my source about this after reading all this, the same one who told me the story for Star Wars Eclipse, as in the whole origin of the main villain, the main gist of the story, how many playable characters there are, as well as Disney's demands, the budget, all of it. I did a whole video about that on the channel months ago. You can go watch it if you don't believe me. So I spoke to that source again about this because they are very much a part of this all too. From what they told me, NetEase has been trying to sell Quantic Dream, the Heavy Rain, Detroit, and now Eclipse studio, since around August 2024. They, as a NetEase, want to wash their hands of Quantic Dream because the game is taking way too long to make. There's nothing really to show for it. I was also told that Casey Hudson, the guy who made Mass Effect and BioWare, he left BioWare quite a while back. As I'm told, in the case of Casey Hudson, when he got funding from NetEase, which was in the millions. Anyway, Casey Hudson eventually founded his own studio with NetEase called Humanoid, and this too was backed by them for years. And pretty much alongside Casey Hudson's company here and many others, none of these studios created anything of note that was actually able to become a real-life video game. In the case of Casey Hudson, when he got the funding from NetEase, which was millions, I was told that he immediately created smaller studios beneath Humanoid that would report to his main studio, which became the original Humanoid studio. Casey was apparently trying to create multiple games at this time and spent ludicrous amounts of money that NetEase needed to create tech demos instead, cutscenes and trailers and etc., but nothing that was actually playable as a game.
I am ready to put on a show!
Hudson found out sometime in 2024 that studio could not be getting more funding since they spent all these years doing nothing, producing zero products. So Casey Hudson just kind of bounced, as I was told. Apparently, according to my source, Casey Hudson likely doesn't care either way what happened to Humanoid to begin with. Because the guy is a millionaire anyways, and he made tons of money from other projects already, like Mass Effect is a good example. So probably to him, Humanoid was just this like vanity project thing that he did to make stuff, but ended up with nothing really. And as my source told me, the usual way these things go at NetEase is that these creative and successful things, they come in, they talk up the storm on how they want to make the next amazing basically double down on promises. They somehow raise more, and then when the raising doesn't come in, they kind of just quit and then leave like magnets. Apparently, when it comes to those layoffs you likely heard about with Marvel Rivals, where that game director guy got let go in Seattle, I was told that this was done so NetEase could run Rivals at the proper game completely free of Western restraints or demands in the future. And when it comes to things like Rebel Wolves, the guys making Dawnwalker, you know, the ex-Witcher devs? Apparently, they're also not getting any more funding from NetEase either, based on what I was told. Like, NetEase is just cutting funding completely for all of these Western game studios. But the rumor that I heard with Dawnwalker is that if they can't cross the finish line due to NetEase pulling the funding, that the next buyer in line for Rebel Wolves right now and Dawnwalker is actually Embracer Group. So look, I'm just telling you what I've been told by people in the industry, right? Don't shoot the messengers. As my source put it, to sum it all up for you nicely, is that NetEase invested in 2021 and 22-ish and gave a crap ton of money to Western developers. These devs promised proper games. Unfortunately, a lot of them, not all of them mind you, but a lot of them ended up just becoming wokey woke DEI slop studios that just wanted to push all the stuff that players don't want, and now, as my source said itself, NetEase is just reading the world and going forward. So frankly, I don't really feel that bad for all this divestment from being honest. As you'd like to see, it's not just NetEase, but Chinese game devs in general, and they have been killing this industry for a while. 2024, for example, that would have been complete ass cheeks had Asian devs not released their games that way. But from what I understand, based on what was said to me, NetEase, which is China-based, is basically taking all of their money and support out of everyone who isn't inherently China-based or, you know, just Chinese brand pretty much. So if you were worried about Rivals, as of now, don't. That game, from what I'm told, is now 100% China-backed. It has tons of funding, and they are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on support for that game, because Rivals crossed something like 40 million players already, which is nothing but, by the way. But from what I understand, the whole point of this is that NetEase wants to essentially make their Chinese-based endeavors become insanely well-funded and just run them like well-oiled machines. So what's the point here, making out? Simple, guys. It's exactly what I said would happen, which is that China will inevitably become the de facto juggernaut developers of video games and market share in gaming going forward. They will likely take over the industry, completely erase any hint of wokeness or anything like the inheritance, all of that. And then they will just rule the gaming industry with an iron fist that cannot be swayed due to how large of a net video has across every single genre, franchise, and then some. Now you may be saying, well, good that China will be erasing wokeness, but isn't this just a monopoly? Yes, you're right. It totally is. And frankly, it would not have happened if Western game development studios not been overrun by activists and completely given into wokeness to begin with. Effectively meaning that this hostile takeover is due to their own hubris and delusion of the pink-haired, there's infinity genders game devs and executive mind virus that has been ravaging games for years now. Right now, Western games are mostly cooked. As I showed earlier, Avowed, a big Western AAA game, is not doing well in raw actual paid sales, and they're just banning people who speak against AI. But here's the thing, right? Once China takes us all over, and they will, because these studios are all known idiots and you're supposed to cater to the players' wants and needs, China will then inevitably just make the games that you want to see. You want Avowed, but without the DEI, China will do it like this. And they will make it half the time, because they've got millions of people that are doing the work on these games in China right now that are just waiting to go. Look, after the explosive success of Black Myth Wukong, pretty much this spell leads with the world gaming industry I've ever seen. As this article states, Wukong was the great unifier of the first China. This allocates your effort and desires to effectively steer bomb going forward. Wukong did so well that other games like Phantom Blade Zero got more funding because of its success, because they wanted to obviously replicate that success for themselves. Even Tides of Annihilation, while I talked here, as you noticed, that's made in China too. The point here is that this apocalypse, so to speak, that's coming for the games industry is of their own making. The Western game industry has pretty much two paths ahead of them. They either keep doing what they're doing, which isn't working, and China just invades them completely and they're cooked. Or they do what China's doing, but with their own economy, and make games that people actually want. However, by doing this, they will have to shed the dead weight of DEI and all of that behind. However, if I'm being honest, I just don't see the most of, the whole Western gaming sphere doing this, if I'm being honest. Because all of these devs that are working now, a majority that have been raised on victimhood mindsets, the very DEI principles that are poisoning the well have become their tenets. It's all they know pretty much, and now you're just going to tell these people to make games devoid of the things they were taught were of the utmost importance? Good luck, because I doubt it. Which is why I think the inevitable outcome is that these companies just die, like Donut, which is, like I said, lost 95% of their value already. Or Ubisoft, or any of these other game studios, and then China can just replicate what they're doing and faster and probably cheaper, and that